Good morning, Breakfast Clubbers. First off, it's so nice for me to be an official member, and the opportunity to actually introduce one of my speakers is just kind of bringing it all full circle. I never really envisioned being in this position, so it's really nice to have this honor. Julie, I've known for years. In fact, Julie and Stephen Campbell, I had them both speaking at the same conference once together. And it was kind of fun being able to see them both sharing different sides of the same coin, talking about brains, which I think is a fascinating subject. So Julie, I'm going to read her intro so I get the proper information out. Julie, Brain Lady, she's referred to Anderson, is considered to be one of the nation's top experts on the brain-personality connection. She is a dynamic and engaging international public speaker, business communication, and relationship consultant, as well as a published author. For more than 17 years, she has been igniting her audiences to fire up their brains to inspire positive changes in the relationships of all in attendance. The information she shares will help those who hear to accelerate their success in life and business through discovery of their natural gifts. Julie's educational background is vast. She studied, that's why I'm not a speaker. She studied natural health, psychology, human resource development, and, Julie, I want you to repeat this a few times because I know you can say this, Psychoneuroimmunology at Clayton College. She is a 3-time attendee of Realizations, Inc., Success Resources International's Brain and Innate Giftedness program. She has also received CECs in the field of depression, anxiety disorders, and brain function. She has done extensive research in the areas of personality types, brain function and anatomy, brain health, and the brain-personality connection. A dear soul, it's a pleasure for me to get feedback on my speakers all the time, and I'm always just getting incredible praise for Julie, what she shares, how it changes people's lives, and how much they enjoy her presentation. So without further ado, let me open it up to Julie and take it from here. Julie, show us your stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anastasia. It is a blast to be here with you guys this morning. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. Make sure we've got this going correctly. All right. I am all about the brain, personality, how that connects with you and with the people that you interact with. And that is why we are talking today about how to deal with difficult people and create dynamic relationships. No matter who you are, at some point in time, you're going to find a personality that is a little tough to deal with. And oftentimes it has to do with, make sure I'm sharing the screen, it has to do with just really the way their brains are wired. So to start with, normally what I would do is I would have you kind of stand there and catch some floating brains as I throw them out at you at the audience. But since we're doing this virtually, we're just going to do a couple of really quick, deep breaths to kind of energize your brain and get it focused on what we're talking about here. So if you will, now we're going to do a deep breath a little differently than what you probably are used to doing. I want you to breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your nose. Breathing out through your mouth is going to give you a relaxation. That's great when that's what you want. But if you want to activate the frontal cortexes of your brain, if you want to activate your concentration, you want to exhale through your nose as well. So just a quick breath in through your nose and then out through your nose. Do it one more time. In through your nose and out through your nose. All right, so now your brain should be energized and ready to go. Okay, we are here to talk all about the brain-personality connection. We're going to discuss how understanding more about the actual wiring of your brain, the DNA, what's in your DNA code will help you to understand better who you are and why you do what you do, as well as other people. Two of the neuroscientists that I love reading their research is John Ratey and Richard Heyer. Now, John Ratey says that a better understanding of how the brain works will give you a better way to get a handle on who you are or who we are. And I like to say by extension, who other people are, what makes them tick. Richard Heyer, who actually does a lot of his work out of the Bay Area there, he says most brains are believed to have an innate energy expenditure in one of the 4 cerebral divisions. In that division, the brain uses less oxygen, glucose, micronutrition, and needs shorter recovery time. In other words, it's just easier for them to work out of that one of the 4 quadrants in the brain. And this is attached or comes out powerfully in our personality. When we talk about the brain personality connection, there are 5 main facets. This is the science and the psychology. So the neuroscience and the neuropsychology. One is your introversion extroversion level. We're going to talk briefly about that today. Another is brain gender. When the Y chromosome is present at 6 weeks gestation, the brain gets a chemical bath, and that chemical bath changes that inherently female brain into a male brain. So there's 12 main areas in the brain of a male and a female that are structurally different. It affects their personality. There's the communication style, your sensory modality, your sensory preference. There's the brain quadrant dominance. That's the one of the 4 cerebral divisions that I just talked about. And then there's the whole other can of worms, and that's your nurture. That's the psychology of it. Who raised you, how you were raised, cultural expectations, family expectations, all of that. That all creates who you are. But to help you understand that you have these natural areas of your brain that you work easier out of, I want you to do an experiment with me right now. If you have a pen or anything or a cup of coffee, put it down for the moment. And I want you to kind of fold your hands like this. Now, some of you have the left thumb on top like me, right? You can raise your hand if you have the left thumb on top. Some of you are going to have the right thumb on top. If you're like me and you have the left thumb on top, you're good to go. Afterwards, those with the right thumb on top, can we private message each other? I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. There's no difference between the two. It's just the way your brain told your hands to fold, right? Now what I want you to do is kind of flatten your fingers, shift them all so that they're folded with the opposite thumb on top. How's that feel? Is it comfortable or is it kind of awkward? Another way to illustrate it is to fold your arms like this, like if you're mad, right? Some will have the left arm on top. Some will have the right arm on top like me. Doesn't matter, not a sign of intelligence or handedness. It's just the way your brain told your arms to fold. Now try to do it just the opposite. It's so fun to do this in front of a live audience because you see all of these arms kind of like a lot of people can't even do it, right? How does that feel? Go ahead and if you want to, utilize the chat. Type in the chat how it feels. Most people find it awkward, and here's the point. You can do it, but it takes more thought to do it. You would never automatically fold your arms that way or automatically fold your hands that way. To do it the opposite, it takes more thought. Thought takes energy. That's that micronutrition, that glucose, that oxygen uptake. It's the same with your personality. It's the same with the portions of your brain that you use. There are areas where you fold your hands and it comes automatic and natural. But to use out of it, it's a little awkward. It's a little strange for you. And that's where the personality dynamics come into play. So we're going to talk about 2 of those in lieu of time. We're just going to cover 2 of those really quickly. The 2 that we're going to cover is introversion, extroversion, ambiversion, and those 4 quadrants that we talked about. I like hitting on introversion and extroversion because in interactions between people, this is a very powerful dynamic that can drive people apart, or it can make it difficult for one person to deal with another person. When you understand the introversion extroversion levels, I want you to know that this isn't being shy or being outspoken. That has so much more to do with the culture, with that your self-esteem, that type of thing. Whereas when we're talking about real introversion and extroversion, we're talking about the reticular activating system and how loud does your brain want incoming information coming into. For example, the introvert, there's about 30% of the populations that are on the introverted side, about 30% that are on the extroverted side, and about 40% in the ambiverts, which is right in the middle. Ambiverts can play in either field, extrovert or introvert, but they just don't do it all the time. right? They can kind of relate to one and kind of relate to the other. When we talk about the introvert, they have a naturally wide awake brain. They don't need a lot of external stimulus going on. They take in a ton of data second for second. So if they're out in areas where there's a lot of stimulus going on, it's going to overload their brain. I'd like to explain it this way. It's as if they take pictures of the world with a big, huge wide angle lens. So they just need 1 or 2 snapshots. And then they're going to spend the rest of the time by themselves, kind of taking apart and processing all this information in these big pictures. So for that reason, they're going to stay in low stimulus, quiet, non-combative, non-competitive situations that are going to keep their brain from being overloaded, keep them from being shut down. Now it's interesting, the introverts, they have a wider, if you kind of want to know when we're back meeting in person, right, how you can identify an introvert right off the bat, in public situations, they're normally the ones that when they walk into the room, they walk in a little bit slower, they're a little bit more cautious, and their brain likes to scan the room and find the safe place to be. They'll oftentimes stay around the outside of the room, and they'll sit, maybe they don't even realize they're doing it, but they'll choose a seat that's closest to the exit. So their brain can step out, can get them to leave the situation or leave the area without being noticed, right? They also have a larger personal space. So when you're talking to them, if they tend to kind of stand back, they want that larger personal space. It's because they're probably an introvert. Now, the extrovert, of course, is on the opposite side of the scale. Their brain is naturally very sleepy. So they're constantly seeking out situations where they can have that extra stimulus to keep their brain awake. If they're not actively engaged, if their brain's not actively engaged, then chances are they're going to fall asleep, literally. My brother-in-law was a high extrovert. We sadly lost him a few years ago. But when he was dating my sister many years back, if you did not engage with him in conversation or play a game or something, I'm not exaggerating, within 10 minutes, the man would be asleep. It was the funniest thing to watch. But that's because for the extrovert, it's as if they are taking pictures of the world with this tight telephoto lens. So they have to constantly move around, taking lots of pictures in order to get their brain enough stimulus, right? Now, this means they're going to lead towards lifestyles or situations that are going to give them that extra stimulus and keep them happy. Now, this could possibly be very chaotic, what would seem chaotic environments to the introvert. You can understand now when you compare these side by side, how the introvert might have a little bit of difficulty dealing with the extrovert and vice versa. So just be cautious about this. Now that you understand this is connected to their brain, you're going to start looking at the introverts and the extroverts a little bit differently, understanding this is the way their brain's wired and this is just what they need. So I like to tell people there are tips, right? There are tips to understanding and interacting with both extremes. I tell them to honor the extroverts or the introverts, honor the fact that their brain is it just needs very little stimulus because it's self-stimulated. Never be late for them. If you're late, it gives them it's gonna make their brain short circuit because they're gonna be afraid of what possible stimulus is going to come towards them. It's breaking their schedule. Give them their space, like literally their personal space. Be cautious about pushing them for an audible answer. When I do these presentations, I never volunteer somebody to come up and help me, or I never volunteer to point at someone and ask them to answer a question because I don't know if they're an introvert or not. I don't want to put them on the spot. So don't put them on the spot. It might really overload their brain. Allow them time to process because remember, they're going to be internal processors. They're not always going to give you a quick answer. And be cautious not to overwhelm them with too much stimulus. Okay. Now for the extrovert, it really means understanding that they're going to have all of this extra energy, right? It's just going to be part of their personality. It is going to accept and encourage that enthusiasm, allow them to talk things out because unlike the introvert, they are external processors, right? So as they're thinking, they're probably going to be talking, especially if they're an auditory person, right? And they're just going to be moving through the conversation fairly quickly. So keep the conversation moving and be understanding of their apparent extra energy. Taking those tips and applying them in your relationships, you'll be really surprised how much it'll help. Okay, let's move on to the second part of the brain personality connection that I wanted to cover today. And we're going to go through this again really fast. Now, this is that one, we're going to talk about the 4 brain quadrants. So back to what Dr. Hare discovered was this energy expenditure advantage that each of us have, according to current scientific research. This is the belief in to use up to 1/100th the amount of energy in one of those 4 quadrants. In your home quadrant, the neurons actually communicate faster. The message is going from one neuron to another neuron across the synaptic gap is 3 times as fast in your natural gifted area. This is your DNA code. Now, what's interesting is the diagonally opposite area is going to take you about 100 times as much energy to work out of. Therefore, that is where it is going to take.
There you go.
Thank you. You have a question? Yep. Okay. Is that me?
Let me check and find out. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this is your brain quadrant dominance. This is where you fold your hands, where it takes the least amount of energy to work out of. Okay. We're going to go through the 4 one at a time. And we're going to kind of move through these quickly, but I'm sure as I describe them, you're probably going to resonate with one of them more. And you're probably going to see the diagonally opposite one is the one where that personality gives you a little bit of conflict. We're going to start at the front left. So if you're looking at the brain from the top down, we're talking about the anterior left portion of the brain. This is what I call the boss brain quadrant dominance. That is because all of the boss type tasks, inductive, deductive reasoning, delegating authority, telling people what to do, fact-based problem solving, making fact-based decisions, that all takes place in this section of the brain. So if this is where you fold your hands, then you are most likely the boss, because it's going to come out in your personality. You're going to be a gifted leader. You're going to be very logical. Things are going to come easy to you because this is where you spend 1/100th the amount of energy. I've given them, to help people visualize their personality a little bit, I've given them the red triangle. And that's red because it's a very strong personality, the boss personalities. They are, and red subconsciously is a strong color. I give them a triangle because sometimes their personality can be just a little bit prickly. I like to share the example of my sister and I. So I'm one of 5 girls. I'm right in the middle. The sister that was born right before me, she is the boss. Now, we were out years ago shopping through the mall, and we sit down and we have lunch, and we're kind of joking and laughing about how the clothing styles that were popular at that time were the same styles that were popular in the early 80s. And I said to her, I said, you know what, if I would just lose 40 pounds, 50 pounds, I could pull all the clothes I have stored under my bed out. I'd have a completely new wardrobe. I'd never have to spend a penny, and I'd be in style. My sister looks straight at me and she says, Julie, get rid of the clothes. You're wasting the space. You're never going to lose the weight. Well, you can imagine I instantly wanted to go for her throat. However, understanding the brain personality connection kept her from a trip to the ER and me from a night in jail, because I held myself back, understanding that, okay, boss brain quadrant, logical, inductive, deductive reasoning. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been blessed to have 3 wonderful boys. In 1992, I delivered a big boy, 9 pounds, 14 ounces, 2 ounces shy of 10 pounds, 22.5 inches long. Do you think these hips are anywhere close to what they were 10 years earlier in 1982? No way, right? So from Chris's point of view, it was just a fact. I'm not going to fit into the clothes I fit into in 1982. logical, inductive, deductive reasoning. When you understand that this is the way the brain is wired, it can really make your interaction with people so much better. We're going to move now to the back left. The back left is what I call the master coordinator quadrant. It is the master coordinator quadrant because this is where everything is coordinated in our lives. If we are organizing things, we are making lists, we are sequencing things. This is where spelling is housed in the brain. So CAT is just a sequence of letters, right? Filed, boom, it's there. That's the way it is. That's where it's filed in the brain. This is the portion of the brain that tracks time, that tracks money. So these individuals are always very punctual and don't like it if their schedule gets messed up. They're gifted at accurately performing very detailed procedures. They are very dependable, very practical, very predictable because they do not like change. They resist change. They like, if it works, don't fix it. For them, their color and shape is a blue square. Blue because subconsciously in the brain, it registers as stability. It actually calms. Blue, they have done psychological studies that show that, or physical studies that show that the color blue can actually lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, lower your appetite. So that's kind of, these people have that effect because they've got all the details taken care of for you. Square because everything is in its organized box and filed. Okay, that is the master coordinator. You might know a few of these in your life, right? They make great VAs, great organizers, professional organizers. Now we're going to jump to the right side of the brain. Something that I want you to understand that's very important about the right side of the brain is that it has many more neural connections to the limbic system in the brain. So the limbic system in the brain is the home of emotion. This is where all of your emotion passes through, or is controlled. So right brainers literally have structurally more connections to the emotion center in the brain, and therefore they're going to be more emotional. They're going to feel more emotion. They're going to display more emotion. They're going to sense more emotion. All right. Something else that's very interesting about the right side of the brain is words aren't housed on the right side. Words are housed in the front left. So right-siders are very visual. This is where your pictures are housed in the brain. Now, the anterior right, the front right, is what we call the innovator brain quadrant dominance. And they're called this because this is the portion of the brain where all of your out-of-the-box thinking takes place. They're very visionary. When you are thinking about how things can be, not as they are, you're using the front right portion of the brain. They are energized by innovation, brainstorming, creative problem solving, because that's where all this takes place in the brain. They see the big picture, not the minute details, because remember I said diagonally opposites is going to be the most difficult for you to access because that's where you're going to spend 100 times as much energy. So for the innovator, the purple imagination bubble, it's going to be the most difficult to interact with, or the personality they're going to find the most difficult to deal with is going to be the master coordinator, and vice versa. Because it just takes so much energy to work there. It becomes those tasks are very foreign to them. This has also been identified as the home of entrepreneurialism. So most anterior rights have a tendency to want to be an entrepreneur. They are the purple imagination bubble because this is where all of that innovative, imaginative thinking takes place. All right, we're going to go back now real quick to the posterior left portion of the brain, or right portion of the brain. This is the most emotional section of the brain. This is where all of your peacekeeping, your harmonizing, your connection, harmonizing literally, this is where the home of music is in the brain. So therefore, it's everything in their life is very harmonious, even the way they speak. This is where all of your sentimentality is connected, is in this quadrant of the brain. So these individuals are very sentimental. They are their memories based on emotion, not facts, because the facts are left side, emotions right side. And in problem solving, they're always going to take the emotional view. And they are the green circles. Green because everything's connected to nature, and green is a color connected to nature. And circle because everything is connected to everything in their lives. And sometimes the red triangle can kind of poke that green circle. And the green circle can't always understand the red triangle because they're the diagonal opposites. But now you understand that this is connected to the wiring in the brain. It is their DNA code. If you want to take, I think we're running a little tight on time, but this particular, if you want to go to this link, I'll put it in the chat. It's a quick 7-question assessment that you can take. There's no information capture on it or anything. You can just take it real quick and it'll tell you which of those 4 quadrants you score highest in. So if we want to, let's take 1 minute and do this. See where you're at. Then you can put in the chat what you come up with. And actually, we are like right there on our time, aren't we? So I'm going to go through these couple of cartoons real quick because I think they really help to emphasize in a humorous way what the brain quadrants are. In this particular one, you see the wife saying, so while you were sleeping, I talked to the doctors and they worked it out so you can still keep building the deck when you get home. Based on what I've shared with you, what do you think her brain quadrant dominance is, the wife? Most likely it's going to be the boss. It's going to be the boss because she has a goal. She's logical. The emotion of what just happened doesn't affect her. She just wants the job done and she's going to delegate the authority. This one's always fun. We need to know your parents' income, your expected summer earnings, your total earnings since the age of 2, the average income of all your first cousins, your father's barber's total assets, 17 forms of ID, and 131 personal references. What do you think Ethel is? Probably the master coordinator because she's just going to take care of all of those details, whether there's emotion involved in it or not. Ready to work at 8, Valez, not here at 8, ready to work. So if time and money are tracked in the back left portion of the brain, who's the diagonal opposite and who's going to have a hard time being on time? It's going to be the innovator, right? So Valez is most likely an innovator. Last one. Oh, come on, Ken. If we've got to lay off people, at least let us have some fun with it. Probably innovators. So one last thought that I want to leave you with is to think receiver, not sender. So when you're trying to improve your relationships, your communication with individuals, think about what does their brain need. We all send on our default, right? We all send the way our brain is wired. But if we want to connect with someone else, we want to understand, we want to communicate better. We want to think, what is their brain? How is their brain going to receive the information? Now, if you want to take a screenshot of this, and I am always willing to send the deck that actually Tony has the deck, feel free to share it and use it and go back and refer to this information because you just want to think about what does the boss need? They need the data, the proof. They need the logic. The master coordinator needs the details. They don't want the big picture. They want emphasize how it's going to help them be organized. The innovator wants the big picture. Don't give them the details, right? The nurturer wants the harmony. They want to be part of your team. They want to work with you. So this is just a really good snapshot of how to improve your communication with those different brain quadrant dominances. All right. So any questions? We ran through that really, really quick.
And Julie, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I really
I went out
appreciate
at
it.
about 8:10 roughly.
Tony, can you somebody's speaking in the background? I just have an observation I thought was very interesting, and I was looking at the comments. Anastasia and I both share one habit, and that is trying to do things a little differently. Like I try and use, when you eat, for example, I used to use my fork with my right hand. Now I try and use it with my left hand, and at first it was really bizarre, and now it's pretty interesting. And if you want to try another one, like when I'm in the shower, I'm used to doing certain things, right? Try doing it the opposite way. It is like so hard. But I think it's healthy mixing it up like that.
It's very good for the brain. You're actually creating new neural pathways. And when you create new neural pathways, I always tell people the more neural pathways you have, the better off you are, because eventually they will start to die off as we get older. So if you've got 10 and you lose 1, okay, you lost 1/10. But if you've got 100 and you lose 1, you only lost 100. So the more you can do things like that, the more neural pathways you create.
That's a good way of putting it. What are the questions we have this morning? Anastasia?
So, Julie, I noticed that you said that the extroverts are naturally sleepy. And I was wondering if you could speak a little to that. You know, I'm definitely an extrovert, but I'm like shying away from big crowds the older I get. But I'm tired like all the time. And I'm just wondering, I suspect you weren't talking so much physiologically, but more brain stuff. And I'm just curious about why. Why are extroverts naturally more sleepy, other than we need the more stimulus? But I didn't know if you could go, further into that.
It's that their brain just shuts off. It's so like if there's not enough stimulation coming in for the extrovert, their brain just kind of shuts off. And when your brain shuts off, you shut off, you fall asleep, right? So the introvert, they've got all this buzz going on constantly, whereas the extrovert, they're seeking that buzz from out here. So if there's not much going on out here, if you have moments of quiet or moments when you don't have anything going on, then the brain starts to shut down and you get physically tired because it just wants to shut off. It doesn't have anything keeping it awake.
Okay, that makes it. And that's probably why I must always have music going, podcasts, something. The only time I get away from it is if it's an intentional, I am stepping away from all of this to be in solitude and quiet. But aside from that, yeah, I guess I am an extrovert. Okay.
Absolutely.
Derek Garden has a question. Oh, Derek, you're on mute, Derek. If you guys, it's your time to speak, make sure you unmute yourself.
Julie, thank you from the other side of the pond. That was a fabulous presentation. I love the speed you presented it at as well. Julie, I had a neuroscience scientist on my chat show that I do on a Monday night, and she keeps telling me off for talking about the left and right brain. I love talking about left and right. She says, Derek, that's old hat. It's not right. It's 80s. It's Tony Buzan information. I love you explaining it like you did. What's the scientific take on it these days?
That's where I would refer you to Richard Hare. He did a lot of work there out of Berkeley. I believe he's still there. You can look him up. He talked about he did a lot of intelligence work and actually doing scans of the brain. So this is based on PET scans of the brain, positron emission tomography scans, where they actually were able to measure the glucose burned, the energy expended during certain tasks. And there's a difference. There's just a difference. What they began to notice was, hey, this person over here, when they play a guitar, they're using 1/100th, they're burning 1/100th the amount of energy that this other person over here does when they're trying to play the guitar. And so they measured literally how much energy was expended. And this is the information that they come up with. He literally found that you had this area of your brain, one of the 4 quadrants, where you spend less energy. And simply put, the wiring on the right side is different than the wiring on the left side. So if you're spending less energy burning on the right side, you're a right brainer. If you're spending less energy on the left side, you're a left brainer.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Bill Buchanan.
Good morning, Julie. Excellent presentation. As you probably confirm, most of us kind of cruise through life, like me, out of the 80 to 100 billion brain cells that we have. I'm usually using about 125 brain cells any time of the day. So anyway, I was thinking about your description of, people's brains and what quadrant. That's a new concept to me. I've always thought, well, it's either right or left brain. But anyway, that's a fresh approach, and I appreciate that. I was thinking as you were making your presentation, I was thinking that I know a lot of people, and I'm included in that group, who may have started out, in my case, up to adolescence, mid-teens, as sort of on the introvert side. Now I'm more an ambivert, but I'm also more, on the extrovert side of things. Is that natural wiring just working itself out, or is that nurture? What do you think?
It's primarily nurture, and then you also have all of the different brain development stages that take place. You've got your 3s when you're 3, when you're around 7, 8, and then when puberty hits, to 10 to 12. There's different brain spurts of growth. A lot of times nurture will have to do with it. We tend to suppress our natural brain wiring based on what we're criticized for and what we're rewarded for. So if you're raised as an extrovert, told children are to be seen and not heard, don't talk, be respectful, be quiet, you're going to act more as an introvert. You're going to be more internal until you come into your own. Remember that the prefrontal cortex, the brain's not completely done baking until you're about 23 years old, male or female. That's when the prefrontal cortex finishes its wiring. And that is the portion of the brain that helps you understand consequences of actions, do critical thinking, problem solving, all that takes place there. So for a lot of us, we don't really come into our full bloom of personality until we're in our early 20s, if we don't have some nurture factor suppressing that. That make any sense?
What other questions do we have?
I want to say something.
Susan?
Well, I had to do a lot of look at the research on introversion, extroversion for an article, a couple articles I wrote for SHRM. And Patricia knows this because we've had this conversation. I am greatly concerned about how we not only label other people and the Myers-Briggs things, oh, she's a DUI or whatever that is, that we do that to kids. I was a former teacher. We do that to kids in school. We label them. He's LDG, he's EMR. And I worry now because of all this, and Susan Cain's book, that we have started to label and self-label ourselves. What I found from people I interviewed is who said they were introverts, but they were HR people, is they found that some of the people that work for them use their introversion as an excuse. So I think the really, I was married to a real introvert, very different than a lot of what I'm saying. Also, a lot of the words are loaded, like that sleepy in your thing versus wide awake brain. And I won't tell you what I am, but because you would never guess. But I think the loaded language disturbs me as well. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of that, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, we're left brain, right brain. So I'm just going to say, we should all know this, know how we communicate with people, know how they communicate back, but let's not label them and not label ourselves.
I agree. Labels can be very restrictive. For the topic that we're covering, it helps us to understand other people. It helps us to understand that their brains work differently. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just simply different. And when you understand, hey, differences are okay. There's no superiority from a right brain to a left brain, male, female, there's no superiority there. It's just understanding the wiring and understanding how, if this person is reacting to you in a certain way, it may have to do with the wiring. And if we can be understanding of that, then we can get along better. That's the biggest benefit of this information.
Stephen Campbell has his hand up, and Stephen, I think, it's interesting having you and Julie back to back. If you guys shared the same stage at one point, one could be the left brain and one could be the right brain. Okay.
Wow, Julie, you're amazing. We need to meet again or connect again. Thank you so much for this. I think what happens, and it's all backed up by what you're saying, is that when we say, well, I'm left brain or I'm right brain, our brains believe in us without question. And when we keep saying it, that neuroplasticity kicks in and it becomes actually true. So that's why our brain, we have to really watch what we're saying, because our brain says, yes, you're right, you're right, you're right. And then those messages become a part of they become our mindset and they become who we are. Wow, you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. You're amazing also. I've loved having Stephen on my podcast in the past, and yeah, love listening. Agree totally with everything that Stephen says. Yeah. Because we can get really deep into this information, and how just what Stephen said, I tell people your brain, the neural chemistry in your brain listens to what you are thinking in your mind. So you have to be careful what you're telling it. Yeah. And this is the same way with other people. If you're telling people, if you're saying, you know what, I'm a right brain. I can't get along with left brainers. Your brain's going to go, okay, I can't get along with left brainers.
Right.
Whereas the way we're trying to present it today is understanding they're just wired differently, and therefore I can get along with them. I just need to take into consideration what their brain needs.
And what I tell people is I don't use the word change because the brain hates change. The brain doesn't want you to change. The brain wants to keep right where you're at because change is scary. So I always use the word replace. Just replace what you're saying. That old stuff is going to still be there, but you don't have to lock onto it. You lock onto the new stuff. And eventually the old stuff gets way in the back of your brain, and in time you don't even know it's there. Brain's amazing. And boy, you really expressed it today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Julie, I have a question for you, and kind of more on pragmatic lines, but you know, our brains automatically do what they do, and so much of it is subconscious. But when we meet a new group of people or we go into another situation, how do we, is there a technique where we can kind of best be aware of what's going on around us and step out of ourselves a bit and just be able to analyze things in the middle of like a meeting, for example, like this? So you're looking at a bunch of people. How do you kind of separate those two so you can be most effective for other people?
Honestly, take a deep breath. Like just take a minute. Just take a minute and prepare your brain. Again, your brain listens to what you tell it to do. So if you tell it, be open, honor everyone that's in the room, honor all of the differences that we meet in the room and the beauty of the different brain personality connections. Be aware of what they're saying, be aware of what they're asking, and your brain will go, okay, all right, I'll do it. I'll follow suit, whatever you want me to do.
Right,
so sometimes it's just a matter of pausing. We run through life so fast. Our lives are so speedy right now.
Yeah.
Just pause, breathe, do that in through the nose, out through the nose to activate the brain, and say, okay, I'm going to be present for everyone and I'm going to honor them.
All right, Patricia.
Well, I love the test. Do you like telling people what to do? Yes, yes. As my brother said, I'm not surprised my sister gets paid to tell people what to do. She was a very bossy little girl. However, my question is, and congratulations, great presentation, wonderful visuals, loved it. Now, when you told us to breathe in and out of our nose, which I'm a bossy person who follows instructions well, I found myself getting dizzy. Was that normal?
You know what? One part, because I was watching the time, and my apologies for this, you need to do it in a rhythmic pattern. So generally what I'll tell people is 4 counts in, hold 2, 6 counts out. So it's if you're not doing that 6 counts out, you're holding too much of the carbon, right? You're not exhaling. So my apologies. I made everybody dizzy. Yeah, that's not, I was watching the time, went, okay, I got to go a little faster. So my brain skipped that. I apologize for my brain hiccup, but yeah, count 4 in. Whatever you're doing, you want to do 50% more exhale. So if you're doing 6 counts in, hold for 2, 8 counts out.
Do we have any other questions? Betty?
Julie, what an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I just, we think we know a little bit about the brain, but you really expanded it and made it extremely understandable. I took some pictures so I can go back and read it. My question is, when I took the test quickly, there were 2 of them, and I'm not sure which ones. I didn't like any of the answers. Does that mean that I'm in a 5th quadrant or something? I didn't like any of them. It wasn't me. And so Rich is saying, yes, it is.
Yes. You're just you're on your own planet, lady. No. So what I tell people is that is just a fun, quick way when I'm doing presentations for people to get an idea. The actual brain personality connection assessment that I have has 27 markers per quadrant. So to narrow those down to 7, it's just a fun snapshot. If there was something there that doesn't resonate with you, Don't panic. It doesn't mean that you're an alien that hatched sometime in the past. It just simply means that was fun. It wasn't all that it wasn't as technical as really diving deep. And then I also will always emphasize, if you are a firstborn or first of gender or only child, chances are you're going to relate very strongly to all of the quadrants. That's where that nurture comes in. Firstborns, only children, they just tend to have more expectations on them, more attention on them to be quote unquote perfect or to perform higher. And so they have a tendency to, like, when I do this in person and I split up the room, right? A lot of times I'll have people going, I don't know, I kind of have a piece of everything. And I ask, I'll look at them and say, you're firstborn, aren't you? And they get freaked out like I'm psychic or something. And it's not that. It's just, there's that nurture piece that will also throw some of the questions off, which is a whole nother can of worms.
And I did come out as a nurturer. So being a nurse, a former nurse, I think it was accurate.
Makes sense.
Nurturing clients. Thank you again. Excellent.
Well, we have time for one more question.
I'll make a quick comment, Craig. It's interesting in my real life, I'm an engineer, so I tend to be the left brain. But when I'm pretending to be Will Rogers was definitely a right brain, very creative. So it's an interesting combination there. And probably in reality, I'm firstborn, the oldest brother. So I'm probably one of those ambidextrous, or whatever you want to call it there.
Absolutely. But what you enjoy doing the most is going to give you what fills your brain energy bank. Because remember, it's 1/100th the amount of energy versus 100 times as much energy when we're talking diagonally opposite. So I always tell people what really makes you feel great. So if you're playing the Will Rogers, if that's what just energizes you, chances are you're naturally wired with the right brain strength, right? We all use all of our brain unless we're, damaged in some particular way. But chances are you're probably innately there. It's just you function very well on the left because of your career.
Thank you.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're at 8:50 now, and I know some people need to start migrating to their appointments. We'll go ahead and end the meeting. Julie, thank you again for joining us. You were
Thank
fantastic.
you very much for having me. Thank you, Anastasia, for connecting me to the group. This is wonderful. It was worth getting up before sun to get ready.
It's a nice way to start the morning, isn't it?
Thank you so much.
So we'll go ahead and we'll keep the room open for till 9 if anyone wants to visit or has questions. And Tony, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Can you give us a brief overview of who we have coming up for speakers?
Just one second.
Thank you. Hey, Randall, I've got a question for you also.
Okay.
So, with you got the engineering mind going on, but then you have the Will Rogers mind going on. So has that changed you as a person?
I have been influenced by Will Rogers' philosophy, definitely. I still have the engineering. I still think like an engineer. I tend to be bossy and I want things done on time. But from the Will Rogers standpoint, I'm much more what you call loosey-goosey, and try to be a little bit more creative and get into other areas. So it's interesting how pretending to be somebody can influence the real life.
So you're kind of like a method actor in real life, it sounds like.
I don't even know what a method actor is, but anyway, it's fun to have the opportunity to, if I feel like it, I can just switch over to Will Rogers and have some fun.
All right, Tony, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Craig and everybody. Next week, we have Janice Litvin, our member, who has just published her book, Banish Burnout Toolkit. She will be interviewed by our own Antonio White, past president of Pitch Freaks, doing an interview about her book, followed by, on the 3rd of March, Ray Engen, who is a comedian. He spoke with us a couple years ago when we were live, and a very funny person is talking about creating more fun out of your virtual meetings. Followed by March 10th, we'll have Greg Whitestone talking about inconvenient facts, global warming facts. So that will be our next 3 lineup meetings. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to an end. And if anyone wants to stick around for a few minutes, please do.